Anyway, for everybody joining, both on the live Zoom and on demand, my name is Sophie and I am the producer general manager for Vault Festival. I am currently sitting in quite a dark room. I'm in Wales in a cottage at the moment. It's very nice. So my background is a sort of white cottagey sort of walls. I'm a female in my late 20s with long dark hair for a visual reference, and my pronouns are she, her. So that's a bit about me. What we're going to do today is talk about budgeting, which I know is a favorite topic for everybody. And I say that with a lot of sarcasm, but it is a favorite, actually genuinely a favorite topic of mine. So hopefully you can all learn something. But as I mentioned, do ask me questions throughout. I love talking back to people. What will I say first? What I want to start and caveat this whole conversation with, and we'll actually use my Vault show later, we'll talk about in specifics, but this is my first year as the producer of Vault Festival. Prior to that, I was an independent producer and have taken shows to Vault Festival before, so hopefully I can answer all of your questions and come from this from a sort of place of realism. I also do have shows in the 2021 festival, so I'm sort of wearing two hats and going on this journey with you guys as well. So hopefully that means that I've got some words of wisdom from both having lived it as a producer and having my own shows on at Vault Festival, as well as working for the festival and producing the festival itself. So that's just a little bit about me, and actually we'll look at my production budget for a show that I did at Vault Festival in 2018, which was a 1-week run in the cabin. We'll look at that later, so you can ask me specific questions about exactly what I did when I did that run, and we got very lucky and we did make a little bit of profit on that show when we did that, so we can talk all about that later. Sorry?
What was the show again?
I didn't name drop it.
Oh,
okay. I didn't name drop it. But if anyone wants to quickly Google it, it wouldn't be very hard to figure out what it was called. But no, I did not name drop it that time, Ellie. I might later. We'll see how I feel. Great, cool. So moving forward, so what we're going to break up this chat today is in 3 main sections. We're going to first talk about income. I'm hoping everyone can see my screen sharing. It looks like, from my perspective, you can. We're going to talk about income first and go through that, and we'll have a little bit of a detour into fundraising because it wouldn't be a budgeting chat without it. Then we're going to talk about expenditure and what the money, how you're spending your money, which is why I asked sort of some information about your shows in the chat. And then we're going to talk about cash flow there at the end. So that's what we're going to talk about. And then we're going to bring up a template called the Total Cedar, which is something that you guys are able to download, and I'll send you a link to that in a bit. But you can all download that and sort of apply that document, that spreadsheet, to your own work and your own shows. So I'll show you how to use that throughout this as well. So let's get started with income. Right, so income is essentially the process of the money that we're making, and so it's all of the money that we're coming in. The most obvious ones, one of this is ticket sales. We will all be selling tickets, and we will make money by selling the tickets. And we'll talk about other different types of income that you might have on your shows in the next slide. But let's just talk about ticket income. Yes, Julia, you'll be able to download these slides later. That's absolutely fine. So just to start, we're going to talk about ticket sale income specifically. So the first thing that you will have a template. I'll send you a template. It's already available on our website, and we'll be exploring this in more detail later. It's called the Total Cedar. This looks very different depending on who you're talking to and in what context. I will send you ours, but there are many, many different ways of approaching a Total Cedar. And for example, if you're doing a West End show in a big house like that with multiple price bands and lots of different ticket types, then the Total Cedar looks very different to ours. but I will show you ours later. But essentially, all a total seater is, when you hear us talking about these terms, what we're trying to work out is what the gross potential is. And the gross potential is what happens if you sell 100% of the house, right? If you sell every single seat, how much money will you make, which is your gross potential. The formula to work that out is going to be however many seats that you have on sale in the auditorium, in the theatre. So do remember that there are house seats in every single venue. So even if the venue's capacity is 100, there might be 2 house seats, which are seats that we do not sell, which will bring your capacity down to 98. So in that scenario, your total seater sum will be 98 times the average ticket price. You might have a concession and you might have a full price. If you're not anticipating lots of concession tickets because it's just not going to attract that sort of audience, or family tickets or whatever discounts, then you might want to just go with the top price or the full price, or skew it down a little bit if you think you can have lots of concessions, for example. Then you're going to times it by the number of performances, and that gives you your gross potential. From the gross potential, we can then work out what the gross income and gross in this sense is going to be, how much has been sold and how much has been earned by from the customers, from the punters buying the tickets. You can then work out from your 100% gross potential, you can work out what 90% of that, 80% of that, 70% of that is, all the way down to 10%, and therefore how much money you might earn if you sell different numbers of seats in the house. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. We then have deductions off of the ticket sales. So we've got the gross, however much money you've made in terms of selling that ticket to the customer. And then what you deduct from the inside of that ticket might include VAT, credit card commissions, agent commissions. Most of those don't apply at Vault, but also box office commissions, which does apply at Vault, and that is 3.6%. So we deduct 3.6% from that. And if you're VAT registered, you have to pay your VAT out of that as well. That gives you your net box office. Then, and we'll show this visually later, so it's okay, you'll see the formulas and everything laid out when we look at the total seater. I'm just sort of explaining the terms at the moment. Venue costs is the next thing that you want to keep in mind. Technically, this is expenditure, but often when you're trying to budget your show and you're trying to figure this out, especially because it's on a sliding scale, like a split, what you want to do is you want to present it like a reduction or a deduction of income, the same way that we do with VAT or the box office commissions. And it's just easier to look at that when you're at the budgeting stage of your process, like the early stage of your budgeting process, like now. The next thing that you might want to deduct out of your income is royalties. Royalties will often come out as a percentage of the net box office. And I'm happy to answer some questions on royalties, but to be honest, if we get into a whole session about royalties, and especially royalty pools, that will take the full hour and a half. So I will just sort of leave it at that at the moment, and I'll ask I'm happy to answer any specific questions about royalties later. And then finally, that leaves you with your sort of net operating profit, they call it, but we're going to call it the net box office for now. There are different terms, and I know that it's confusing. All of these terms have slightly different meanings, but one of the most confusing things that I took a long time to learn was that people use the terms gross and net in very, very, very different ways in different times, and it depends on who you're talking to, whether they're meaning gross is just deducting VAT, or if there's other deductions in there, is it meaning after all of the costs come out, is that net? It can definitely mean a lot of things. So right now in this situation with tickets, what we're going to do is we're just going to say that gross is however much money directly is coming in via the tickets you've sold, and then the net is only deducting the deductions here. And so that's what we're going to use as our terminology here today. Quick little note here. The percentage average was 56% in 2020. That's what the average show at Vault Festival sold then. But, you know, safety is better. Plan for the worst, hope for the best, as they say. So I personally would always look at around the 40% mark and make sure that my budgets can work out about that. Can I actually, before we'll go through this slowly, because I know that these are some big confusing mathematical terms, do we have any questions at this point about ticket sale income specifically before we go on to other types of income? Nope. Good. Oh, someone just lit up. I don't know whether you got a question. No. Great. Moving on to other types of income. So you might have, as well as your ticket sales, you might have income coming in the form of donations. This does not mean investment, and we'll just chat about investment in a second, but a donation might be a check from a family member or a friend that they do not expect you to pay it back. That's the key thing about donations. It could also be a well-placed letter to a rich member of the industry, a famous person or something, who then writes you a check. However you get sort of donated money, that's one way of looking at this. I'll circle back to TTR in a second. The Arts Council England, I hope you all know about project grants and developing your creative practice. Unfortunately, depending on where your shows are in the week, unfortunately, I think some of your shows now might be outside of the Arts Council turnaround time, because I think we are less than 10 weeks out from week 1 of the festival. However, for some of you at the end, if you haven't got your Arts Council bids in, applications in yet, there is still time, and I do encourage you to do that. It's not it's certainly plausible and possible for Vault Festival shows to get funding from the Arts Council via a project grant. Then there are other grants and trust funds. This is hard, I'm going to be honest. There's not that many and they're few and far between, but there are a small handful of grant giving bodies which don't require you to have a charity. And I've just listed a couple there on these slides. And then other ideas for fundraising or for other types of income. I think the days of running a sort of bake sale are over. I'm not sure that that's really a good use of time. But, do think about other ways that you might be able to earn some money from your work. A very popular one at the moment, for example, is selling and running workshops alongside your work, for example. So that's sort of one way to think about this. The other way is that like a lot of universities have money and they will often write checks out when you can associate your show with some research, for example. That's especially good for development. There's corporate giving and sponsorship, for example, that you might want to go down that avenue of trying to get sponsorship. It is difficult, but it's possible with the right connections. There's all sorts of other sort of crazy ideas you could do. Work, scratch nights, pre-drawing, entering competitions. Like the world's your oyster in terms of how creative you want to get. Maybe you want to do a pre-concert or something, I don't know. But I would say that with these sort of, when you're trying to think of creative ways to earn money, do consider how much money that is likely to yield you, and if it's worth it or not in terms of your time, because often I would say a lot of people go down some really creative and fun ideas of earning money, but that energy would have been better off spent marketing their show and selling tickets. That would be my advice on that. A little note about investment when it comes to, when we were talking about donations before, and then we'll talk about tax relief. Investment is not income. Investment is only really useful when you're considering risk and cash flow, which we'll talk a bit about cash flow later. But ultimately, the precedent for investment is that you will pay back the investors their money, and you'll also pay it back with profit if there is any profit, which means that it's not free income, it's not free money. The precedent is there that you have to pay that back if you earn the money. So that's the sort of main difference between investment and donations. Theatre tax relief. I don't know whether people have heard about this or not heard about this, but if you haven't, hopefully I'm going to blow your mind, because it's free money from the government. We like this. We like free money. What happens is, if you are a registered company, so that means registered Companies House, it could be a limited by guarantee, limited by shares, a charity, for example, and if you aren't, it costs you about £13 and it takes about 15 minutes to do it online to register a company. As long as you are registered as a company and you submit what they call a CT 600, which is a corporation tax bill, and you pay and you submit for your corporation tax, then you are eligible to put in a TTR claim or TTC claim. The terms get used interchangeably. It is either stands for theatre tax relief or theatre tax credit. The way that it works is that the government will tax rebate you. It was 20% of 80%. Don't ask me why 20% of 80% and not just like 16.6% of 100%. I'm not sure, but that's the rule that they made up. So it was 20% of 80%. However, in Rishi's most recent budget, this has increased to 45% until 2023. So if you take your entire budget, but there are some exceptions, which I'll say in a second, but a lot of your budget, and you times that by, you look at 80% of that number, and then you look at 45% of that number, that's how much money you get back, which could result in hundreds of thousands, really. The exceptions of what you can claim. So you've got your entire budget, every single penny you spend on your show. What you have to deduct out of it is what we call running costs. Running costs are essentially every penny spent after opening night or after your first performance. That doesn't mean paid. That means that it's associated directly with actually running the show on a day-to-day basis. So that could include actor wages and fees for performing. That could include daily technician fees. It could include hires, lighting hires. It could include having to spend £6 at Tesco every day to replenish some crisps on stage that you eat, whatever it is that you can't claim for. And you also cannot claim for marketing. So everything that you spend pre-production, otherwise you can. So that's all rehearsal costs, most creative fees, all of your set costs, all of your costume costs. These you can all claim on this. So it is really worthwhile doing, and I hope that that is helpful for everybody. That is the end of the income section of my chat at this stage. Does anyone have any questions about income at this point, or any questions or advice they want? Put it in the chat, or unmute yourself is fine. No, either I'm being really boring or I'm being really informative, and I hope it's the latter. Great, we'll move on then to expenditure. So here's some tips about how we're going to, thank you, Laura. This is great for my ego, guys. I appreciate the informative. Great. So moving on to expenditure. So this is everything we're going to spend, not everything we're going to earn now. Let's talk about fees and wages first. And I'm going to, this slide specifically is about performer fees. So the first thing to consider is union rates. In the UK, well, here we work off of two main unions. They're called ITC, the Independent Theatre Council, and UK Theatre. There is a third one called SALT. But they are the West End governing union. So we're not West End, we don't have to worry about them for the time being. ITC and UK Theatre are the two that you will most likely come across. You can have a look on those websites. If you're not a equity member, you probably have already worked out that you can't just go onto the equity website and download these rates. You have to be an equity member in order to look at the rates, but you can look at the UK Theatre rates just by going to the UK Theatre website. And basically the way it works is that equity and UK Theatre negotiate. So that's the same thing. The equity rates and the UK Theatre rates, they mean the same thing. And the same with ITC there. So it's not that there's, I think everyone gets confused about what you mean when you're talking about equity rates. And the reality is that that means the same thing as an ITC rate or a UK Theatre rate. So on their website, so then on the UK Theatre website, for example, you can get rates, union rates there available for actors, directors, designers, stage management. I think lighting designers are on there. A lot of backstage roles and crew roles are on there, but some roles such as producers, general managers, sound designers, there is no sound design union, so sound designers do not have union rates. So a lot of specialty directors, dramaturgs, they aren't represented by any unions, which means they don't have union rates. So for those people, you have to kind of look at equivalent what you're paying other people and what other unions are negotiating, really, and set a precedent off of that. It's a bit more difficult. So that's the union rates. I believe I actually, you know what, I'm not going to say what it is. I'll Google it in a bit and I'll tell you at the end, or maybe someone can Google it for me and figure out by the end of this session, and let everyone know what the current UK theatre and ITC rates are. They changed over the pandemic and I haven't fully looked at them in a few weeks. The next thing that you might hear us all, and which a lot of artists do work on at Vault Festival, is what they call the equity minimum. There is something called the equity exceptional minimum, and sometimes people mean that when they talk about equity minimum, that's associated with UK theatre, and that's a little bit, usually a bit higher. But what happened is that equity introduced something called professionally made, professionally paid, which is often now gets talked about as equity minimum. So it's worth, if you ever talking to a producer, this is my advice to you, if you're sort of negotiating fees as creatives yourselves, if you're ever talking to a producer and they're talking about equity minimum, clarify what they mean by that, and actually vice versa. If you're ever talking to an agent or an actor, performer, and they are asking you, talking to you about equity minimum, clarify which one they mean. The professionally made, professionally paid equity minimum is based on the national minimum wage. So what you have to do that is work out how many hours that performer is likely to be working. So if they're working Monday to Friday, 10 till 6 in a rehearsal room, plus they might be on call from their call time until the end of their show, and maybe 15 minutes after their show to get out of costume. However, that might be 3 hours of performance. Calculate all those hours up, times that by the minimum wage, which is currently £8.91, and then you have to add holiday entitlement on top of that, which is a complicated sum, but an easy way it converts down to that we tend to all use is 12.07%. So you would then go total amount of hours times £8.91 times 112 times 07%, 112%. 112.07%. As a quick note, Equity are always more than happy to discuss and support people navigating these contracts. So even if you're a producer and you're not like a Equity member, and you're a producer and you pick up the phone and you go, hey, I really want to pay my performers properly, and the people working on my show, I'm just trying to work out how exactly I do this for professionally made, professionally paid, they will help you even if you're not a member. That's fine, at least in my experience. Other fees, which might be specific, that might come up for Vault, might be your lighting, set, costume, and sound designers. My advice to you, this is very specific to Vault Festival, my advice to you is consider what it is, consider what they're doing and what you need, because sometimes, for example, having a lighting designer is not necessarily the same thing as having somebody to program lights on a fixed rig like we have at Vault Festival. So really think about like what you're paying for and what you're getting. And the same with set. I think an easy mistake a lot of people go down is they go, oh, here's the set designer, and then they don't consider whether or not the set designer has the workshop space or the skills in order to execute and make the set. And so that's a sort of note about hiring, but also a note about like, if you're hiring a particular designer, do they need support, like builders, to help support them with their vision, and just to keep an eye on that and to make sure that they align, because otherwise you can get in hot water. But very specifically to Vault, we can provide you technicians who can program the show. They can mix files in QLab. They can essentially do a lot. If you've got a decent clear vision about what lighting cues you want and how you want it to look, they can program all your lighting for you, and this we recharge to you on an hourly fee, which often works out much cheaper than a designer. So just something to keep in mind there when you're thinking about your team and putting your team together. Who do you need? Stage management. What I'll say about this is that some shows at Vault, a couple of the shows here have some large casts, and so you might, and lots and lots and lots of cues, especially musicals often have lots of cues. So you might require a DSM or stage manager. DSM stands for deputy stage manager. an SMS stage manager for the whole rehearsal period and the show process. You might know them the whole time. But if it's a small show and it's like just yourself, do you consider, do you really need that stage manager in for the rehearsal period, or do you just need them in for the last few days or the last week of the rehearsal period? That's something that often happens. Or maybe you just actually, you need them to, there's a few cues, a handful or 2 handfuls of cues. They can probably learn it, pick it up in during your tech session. Then in that case, we can also provide you a stage manager operator, for example, just for the run. We don't provide them for rehearsals though. And then we can recharge the cost of that. So that's an hourly fee as well it's a per show fee for the stage manager operators. And then I know about specialists, most specialist directors. So here I'm talking about movement directors, fight directors, vocal coaches, accent coaches, intimacy directors, etc. They all work off day rates often. So just to keep that in mind, that helps you condense your budget when you're just being really, really thinking about how to best utilize that time. Great. So that's all of my information here about fees and budgeting fees. Any questions about fees or union stuff at this point? Or I'll just keep going. Great. Let's talk about physical production then. So here we're talking about effectively technical and set props, costume, etc. So a little thing about thinking about your technical provisions, which in this case is going to be sound, lighting, and video. If you are using and working with video, is that Vault Festival, we do design out our spaces with, I would argue, really adequate sound, lighting, and in a lot of the spaces, video provisions, but not in all the spaces do we have projectors. So I would say that unless you have very necessary technical needs, or a key moment, like a very, very key spotlight moment, or complex projection mapping or something like that, then, I don't think that for the most part you should worry too much about tech. We should be able to provide more than enough for most shows that come to the festival. And those costs are included in the space and in your splits as well. You don't have to pay anything for them. But if you do need specials, so that spotlight or something very specific, then we order all of this stuff en masse from our suppliers, and so that means that we can get bespoke rates and discounts. So sometimes it can be cheaper for you to email our technical team and have a chat to them. It's also better because then they're going to make sure it's with the delivery, it's going to arrive on time, they'll help rig it, etc. Just contact our tech team and make sure that you've spoken to them about your technical provisions. Don't go, and they'll give you the rates and recharge it back to you. Don't go unless you really, really have a great mates rates deal. Don't go off, and you don't need to go off and kind of source it yourself, basically. The best email address to contact for that is probably tech@vaultfestival.com. There we go. But specifically, you can go lighting@vaultfestival.com for lighting, sound at vaultfestival.com for sound, and video at vaultfestival.com for video. There we go. Set props and costume. The biggest thing and the sort of biggest mistake that people kind of get into with this is not thinking enough about the turnaround times. You do have to get in and get out every single night of your show because there will be other people performing in the space, and storage is not at the plenty. It is limited. There is enough, I'm not trying to freak you out, but it is definitely something to consider. Don't come in with massive sets because it can get really difficult. But the really good news is that audience of Vault Festival just don't expect that in the same way that they do in the West End. So really do consider what you absolutely need when it comes from this. It'll help you save money. It's not going to really diminish the experience on the whole. No one that comes to the festival, no audiences are expecting, all the bells and whistles and you to spend thousands and thousands and thousands on revolves and anything like that. So do think about all of that, what you need, and do think about what is it that you can get in and out within a quick time. As I said to you before, with set, and props and costume for that matter. What's the making process? This is the number one pitfall everyone goes down. They hire these designers, and then the designers go, yeah, but I need a props master to make this stuff, or a shopper to go out shopping for the costumes. I can't make this, or you need to pay me more to make this, or whatever. So just make sure you're sort of being upfront with them about the expectation. You guys are having that communication level, and you really know that when you're hiring those designers that they're going to execute and deliver and make what they need as well, and you've negotiated that. Yeah, and I said that is because genuinely the largest cost usually, especially on sort of big shows, is on makers and carpenters. So especially if it's bespoke builds. So just do keep that in mind when you're doing that. A good place to look for some stuff, of course, is Set Exchange, Facebook groups, and Gumtree. Set Exchange is specifically for, like, mostly it's the theatre and film industry that use Set Exchange, and you can get some really cool stuff on there. Yeah, cool. Let's have a chat about, so that's basically everything sort of production-y, and we're going to go talk about marketing. So if you've got any questions about production, then ask them. No. Fine. Cool. So marketing. Right. Yeah, everyone was always like, how do we budget marketing? How much should I market? Or how much should I spend on marketing? I think every producer has a different role. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I have heard a million different things over the 10 years of being a producer, and every time it's slightly right and slightly wrong, and there isn't a hard and fast rule. However, my personal rule is to look at what your how much money you're trying to make. So how much in your ticket sales are you trying to make in order to break even, or what your target is, or whatever. And I would look at 20 to 30% of that number should be spent on marketing. What does that mean? It basically means to spend 20 to 30 pence of every pound you need to make. So that's my personal way of doing it. That was, I came up with that formula because I basically took about 12 of my own shows, and I looked at what I spent on marketing, and I tried to look for and what they ended up selling, and I tried to look for trends. That was like the best trend I could come up with. It hasn't really failed me completely yet, so that's my rule. Sometimes people will say pound per seat, not pound per pence per pound. Some people will just say 20 to 30% of the budget. My problem with looking at what the total expenditure of the budget is, and then working out the marketing on a percentage of that, is that the marketing directly correlates with how many tickets you're selling. So why look at the other money you're spending as a sort of metric? A show can cost, loads or not loads. It doesn't really bear any direct correlation on how many seats you're going to sell. So I would definitely associate the marketing budget to how much income you need. So that's my rule. You might all balk at 20 to 30%. Fair enough. It is a big number when you break it down. For most people, it is too much of a number to fit into their budgets. So what I would say is think about what you are able to provide as what you might call support in kind, or what you're able to get out of support in kind, and then value that properly, and sort of use that to create your 20 to 30% of, like, yes, I am actually spending 20 to 30% of it on marketing, even if that's not direct spend, if that makes sense. So for example, if you can take photos yourself, that's got a value to it. Great. Other costs about budgeting that you might have at the Vault Festival. Travel, or always account for more than what you think, because I promise you will end up with sneaky last minute stressful cabs. You will end up forgetting about ULEZ or congestion charges. Taxis adds up. Okay, here, real life scenario, and this hopefully doesn't happen to anyone at Vault Festival, and it's not a touring show, so it shouldn't, but with Brexit going on at the moment as well, I had a van booked for a tour that went out in September, and 2 weeks before the tour was supposed to start, we got cancelled. So the van got cancelled. The hire company was like, we don't have it anymore, sorry, bye, here's your money back. and we literally ended up having to pay double to get a van in the first place. And then you'll all remember the fuel crisis that happened. That was in the middle of my tour, and it ended up costing us about essentially double our entire van and fuel budget than what we had. So that's a real life example. Of course, that's Brexit. I'm hoping that's not that bad, but do budget that properly. Rehearsals is another cost that comes up. We can provide you rehearsal space. Huzzah! It does have a small cost, but hopefully I think the rental costs for our rehearsal spaces are competitive, and it means that you might be able to rehearse in the space that you need to perform, and it's a bit less stressful because you don't have to worry about it. You can just send us through a rehearsal request form, which is on our website. I'll find it for you guys if you want, and ask to rehearse at the vaults. Otherwise, some other spaces to look in that are pretty cheap and great I've listed here, but I will say that recently I would even say like places like the Jerwood space. If you haven't heard the Jerwood space, it's like one of the big sort of fancier spaces that a lot of the West End shows rehearse at. They have been pretty competitive pricing wise lately, so they're worth looking into. And also remember audition costs if you need those. Insurance is something that a lot of people forget that they need. We do need you to have insurance in order to perform at Vault Festival, and you'll need PLI and ELI. The good news is that we are able to provide this also. So you do email, you'll get a tech form out, and on that tech form, when you get sent those, I think that's going to be unlocked in the next couple of weeks on Eventatron, and on that it will give you all the details about opting in to our insurance scheme, which is like a small per performance fee, and if you opt into that, then we will just take care of it all. If you are definitely planning on touring or doing multiple shows throughout the year, though, it might be worth just having an annual policy, which will cost you more upfront but will be cheaper in the long run because you will always need insurance everywhere you perform. So that's a note about insurance. Royalties, again, I said I didn't really want to get down the loop of royalties because we will be here forever. Not every show works with them, but it can be a great way to really, a lot of people are going to be working on reduced fees or not as much as we're worth, and we know this at Rock Festival. So royalties and royalty pools can be a really, really great way of kind of being able to bring your creative teams on more of a journey. And it's worth saying that this is not profit share. What I'm saying is paying people fees and then getting points and percentages of royalty on top of the fee based on profit or ticket income. That's very different to a profit share because they're still getting fees. And then PRS is the last thing you need to remember. PRS is basically a governing body which pays musicians for us all to use their music. Fair enough, they're artists too. Vault, we will sort most of this out unless you have, you can't just take all of Beyonce's music and make a musical about with it and then not have direct permission. So there are exceptions, but if you're talking about what they call non-diegetic sounds, which is essentially background sound or sound that is not sort of reacted to necessarily by the artist or incremental, incidental or incremental to the show itself, then you basically just pay a small fee for it. It's not that much. Ellie, unfortunately people in the first week, thank you for reminding me to say, everyone, if you're in the first week you're not able to access rehearsal space, I'm afraid. That is the one thing. Everyone from week 2 onwards is able to, I think, but week 2 people would only be able to get it for a few days before, and that's because we are building the festival, to be honest with you, and it definitely would not be a quiet or workable environment whilst we're all doing the get in, because we basically build all the spaces up from scratch. Cool. So yeah. Ellie, my shows I've got 2 shows in the first week, so I'm with you there and we can hang out. You don't have yourself to blame. There's loads of other amazing spaces that it's probably going to be the same price. So no, first week rules. We like the first week as much as we love every week. It's just that unfortunately we don't have rehearsal space. Cool. We're going to go into my show's example.
Sorry,
Hey,
can I ask a really quick question?
Of course you can.
Regarding PLI and ELI, does obviously all performers, like obviously everyone needs PLI, but do we also need ELI if we're all self-employed, like who are working on the show? As in, like, I'm not paying any
you do.
national
I think
insurance or anything.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. So by the act of you effectively paying them a fee, they are working for you, even if they're a freelancer and self-employed. So the only time you wouldn't need ELI is if you were literally a band of one, in which case there's nothing. But the second that there is a sort of producer dynamic, as in a boss dynamic, that person becomes responsible for everybody who is working on their production, regardless of if they're an employee on PAYE or not.
So would it be like, if, because there's three of us essentially on the production team, it is my show, but the three of us are working really, really closely together. Would we all need ELI, or would it just be like one of us?
You get one set of ELI basically. So whoever, basically the company that is contracted with Volt is the same company which will need to have PLI and ELI.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, not everybody. So actually, even them won't need PLI because your PLI will be covered. A lot of people get PLI. I should stop using acronyms. PLI stands for public liability insurance and ELI stands for employee liability insurance. But those two acronyms you will see everywhere. PLI and ELI, a lot of people get PLI through equity or through unions or another way, and they'll have personal PLI. But if you don't, that's okay. Only the producer needs to have PLI and ELI.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
No worries. Billy, who is best to get in touch with about PRS and specifics of how music is used in our show? The best person to get in touch with is Emma, whose email is prod coordinator at vaultfestival.com. I'm going to double check if it's prod or production coordinator. I think also Emma at will work as well. And you'll also get an email in a couple of weeks when we release the tech forms, which will basically be like, here's all the information we need from you. And on that information, it includes, you have to submit us a risk assessment and also a PRS declaration. And the PRS declaration essentially is you telling us what music you're going to use in the show, and we can help you work that out. Cool. So this is my show, 1 week in the cavern, and we can just kind of look at how this broke down a little bit. So the gross ticket sales came to 3,600. That was after deductions, but not after the Vault split, which you can see I've included on the expenditure. This contradicts what I said earlier, which was that it was a deduction of income. However, that's because what we're looking at now is me showing you my budget after the fact. What we're going to look at when we look at the total CEDA in a bit is before the fact, when I'm trying to predict my budget, rather than what you're looking at now, which is matured. It's what's actually happened. Is the secret show from the beginning. This is the secret show from the beginning of the meeting that I said. Maybe when I stop recording, I'll say what it is. It's really easy to find this out. If you literally just Google who I am, it will probably show up at some point. Kickstarter. So that was a crowdfunding campaign. We did a really small crowdfunding campaign and got £576 worth of donations. And then TTR, the free money that I said that we got from the government, we got £178 because back in 2018 and up until very recently it was 20%, but of course now that's 45%. So you can see that would actually equate to a lot more than £178 right now. So we in total had an income of 4,414. On our expenditure side, we did pay the Vault Festival 1,000, just over 1,000. PRS, there we go. It gives you a good indication how expensive this is. It's really small, 12 quid. Insurance was 133. Fees and wages, £1,000. Production costs, 278. £300 on PR, which is public relations. printing 111, social media 133. So those are my marketing costs all bulked up there, and miscellaneous like travel and some bits and bobs, we came to 45. So you can see there it was a total of 3,100 for a week in the Cavern, and I had an income of 4,400, so a small profit, which was really nice. I will also say that I'm a little bit savvy, less so now, but I used to be more savvy with the camera. And so I actually, you know, when I was saying about valuing the marketing stuff that you can put out yourself, for this show, I did not spend 20 to 30%, but that's because I did my own videography and cut my own trailer. I did my own photography and put that out. There was already a poster that existed. There was already some reviews that existed, etc. So all of that sort of counts towards the overall marketing package, I suppose. So there's my show for you to see how that went. Cool. We're going to have a look now at the total seater, and I'm going to stop sharing so I can show you this. So actually, this is the point in this chat where I show you the link of how you can download this first. So my first advice to everybody is to download this and have a play with it after I show you how it works for your own shows. Where do I need to go? Perform with us. It was on the application guide, but I know it's been a very long time since you've all applied. Okay, so in the chat here, I've just put a link which will take you directly to the financial deal of the application guide. And if you scroll down to the bottom of that, there's something called example seeder. And then it's got a hyperlink to, we've created this sample seeder, which you can download and play with the numbers. And that is what we're going to be looking at now. So that template, basically. Oh, Lauren, how many people were involved for those fees and wages? This is a two-hander. So there was 2 actors and a director. Oh, my internet connection is unstable. It says, am I okay? Can everyone hear me at the moment? A thumbs up or just a yes in the chat would be great. Okay, I think Lauren can, because she's responded to my great, cool. Zoom is lying to me, my connection is not unstable. Okay, I should have pre-prepared this, but just give me a second. I'm just going to open up Excel. I should have pre-opened it up. Oh, sorry. Okay, it's a little laggy. If it cuts out at all or gets really bad, please just put something in the chat or tell me to go back, and I'm more than happy to kind of go back. Okay. Great. I've only got single screen tonight, guys, as well, so I'm trying to look at both things at once. Okay, so we're going to open this up. Hopefully you can all see this. So this is more or less what's you can download online, and you can see here that it says to complete and manually adjust the things that are highlighted in yellow. So the first but let's call the test show on here. So it should have all of the different venues that we have there. So let's look at 3 nights in the studio. Why not? So performances, or actually, I mean, I can put someone else's show here. Drag Baby, 2 nights in the Cavern. Lydia, let's look at yours. Cavern. Okay, and you're doing 2 nights, so 2 performances there. Oh, Lydia, you didn't tell me how much your tickets were. That's fine. It's my fault. I didn't ask you. Lydia, could you let me know how much your tickets are? I am assuming maybe 11.50, but I can change this. I'll change this if I've got it wrong, Lydia, or if you're there. But great, cool. So 11.50. And then the next thing that you will need to change is B8 here is deal. So currently it's a 70-30 split, which is what everyone's sort of on a standard, but then you could have the one drop down below that, the 60-40. So if you select the financial relief deal, then make sure you change that. Okay, so let's extend it out. Right, so if we go back to the very start of this, then this was what I was talking about as the gross potential. So that's 2,116, and then you can just work out, if you know the 100%, then it's really easy to work out what the 95 and the 90 is, and actually so much so that you can literally see how we've done our formulas there. We literally work it out at 85% there of the 100%. So that's your total gross revenue, is the total box office revenue in this first line here. Then you've got the deductions, like I was saying at the start here with income. So that's already automatically built in. And then you've got the net box office. So I said that there was lots of different ways that you call net, and we're going to use net again later. But for right now, this is the net box office, and that's after the deductions, the box office commission, which you can see there is already factored in as 3.6%. So that's it there as well. So if we scroll across, we can then see that I've highlighted here in yellow what the average sales at Folk Festival tends to be. They tend to come between 35 and 65%. And I've also put a note here just to remind everybody that the average in 2020 was 56%. So if we look at 55% as a good metric here, then you're likely to make £1,122 there for revenue distribution. A net box office, but like I said, I like to look at things at around 40% just because I'm really safe and want to sort of make sure that I'm planning for the worst. So this show here then at 40% would make £816. After that, we've got automatically, it comes up with what the venue costs guarantee is going to be on your shows. You can see it's a static number. It's all in your deal memos, depending on how much you're paying there. But this should automatically come up with what that is. And what happens is that you pay the venue cost guarantee or the split. You don't pay both. So that's why then here it's £0, because basically what this formula is doing is saying if the split is less than 369, then you're just going to pay 369. If it's more than 369, then what's the difference between 369 and what the split would be? And it adds on that extra bit here for the Volt split. So you can see then, if you just sum up those two numbers together, exactly how much Volt would be making. So at 40%, Volt would be making £369, but at 50%, we would be making £408, for example. So that's how that works. And then it works out, row 25 is what we then pay over to you, the artist split after we deduct it. So that's what I mean by the even though venue costs are an expenditure, they're an expense. You can see here that I have made it, it's sort of coupled up here in the income portion of it, is what we're looking for. So there's that sort of, that's how you use it. You can stop here and you can just go, great, cool, £447, I'll take that, put it into my budget, do its thing, ignore the rest. Or you can turn this, and I'm going to show you this right now, you can turn this into what we call a profit and loss statement. I'm just moving some tabs around so I can show you all properly. So to turn this into a profit and loss statement, which is going to become really evident what this is in just a sec when I show you. What you're going to do is you're going to put your fixed hard costs, your fixed expenditure here. So you're basically, what are you budgeting to spend? So let's put that here, expenditure budget. So let's say, for argument's sake, you're planning to spend £1,000. We can carry that all the way across. £1,000. Doesn't matter how much money you spend, it's always going to be £1,000. You might then have what we call unfixed expenditure. For example, royalties. You might need to put that in here, but it's not necessarily something that everyone has. So this is just if you do have unfixed expenditure, like royalties, this is how you might do that. And let's say that it's off the net box office there. So you would put let's say it's 5%. You would put 5% there and there, and then you could drag this down and it will just automatically calculate your 5%. Then you are going to, I've got my instructions here, but I don't even know what this next bit is trying to do. Oh yeah, great. Then you're going to work out your sort of operating profit, which is going to be your sort of working profit, I suppose, or your sort of working ticket profit, which is going to be what you receive, so your artist split, minus your budget, minus your fixed costs. Minus £1,000, minus the fixed costs there, and then you can scroll that all the way across. Great. And you can see here basically when you make a profit and when you make a loss. So this is a pretty expensive show for how much money you're likely to make. The break even, as they say, is sitting somewhere here between it's a pretty much 90%, really, isn't it? If you're making a profit of £9, pretty much 90%. That's pretty high. But you have other types of income. This is just looking at the ticket income at this point. So you need to add that other income in. So add other income. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that 121 and we're going to add TTR. Let's say that is £350. And maybe you did a little bit of fundraising. Maybe you ran a Kickstarter like I did on my Vault Festival show from 2018. In which case, let's say that you got £450, which I think what did I have, 550 or something. So let's put that in. So we've added in our other income in there. So we can scroll that across and then we can see what our new break-even point might be. And our new break-even point now is very healthily at a 30%. That's pretty good budget, I would say. That's, you can kind of work out your own risk at that point. But I hope that this sort of gives you a good indication, basically, of what a profit and loss statement is and sort of how you can convert this document, this total CEDA that we've already provided you, into a P&L, they also call it profit and loss, and look at where your break even sits. And this is a really easy way of doing that and working that out. So I hope that was helpful for everybody. I'm going to stop sharing this and we're going to go back to the presentation. Great. Okay, so that was just my little notes here. So this is actually written into the slides. So you were saying, can I download the slides before? The answer is yes. And on this slide here, you can see it literally shows you step by step how to do what I just did on that spreadsheet, which is why I was referring to it, because it's 8 o'clock at night and it's easier than me thinking and making a mistake. So it's really easy to use. Just follow these instructions. Let's talk about cash flow for a second, and then we're going to open it up, and that's sort of the end of this workshop. This is the final part. Actually, any questions before this point? I'm using it as an excuse to have water, really. Cool. Cash flow, right? So we've talked about income, we've talked about expenditure, we've talked about profit and loss statements, we've talked about total seeders. I know that these are really lots and lots of different financial terms, but the last one that I want to let you all go off into the night with is cash flow. I hope you've all sort of heard it when people have been talking about budgeting, what that is. So cash flow is inherently different from budgeting. They interlinked, they have a relationship with each other, but they are different things. So what I'm going to say about cash flow is what's the difference and why is it important? Is because what we've just done when we looked at that total seeder before, and we used that, I use that sort of 2 nights in the cabin example with the £1,000 budget as an example to work out that eventually we got to our break even of 30%. That's great. That's like you've done half the job. You've made a balanced budget, right? It's plausible that you're going to break even. 30% isn't super risky. I would say that's pretty good to balance the books. But a lot of that income, in order to do that, in fact, most of the income, in order to break that balance those books, doesn't come straight away. And that's what the process of cash flowing is. So what do I mean by that? Firstly, you don't get ticket sale income straight away. You will only get your ticket sale income to a minimum of 28 days after your last performance. That's for a multitude of reasons, but mostly a legal one. So you'll 28 days after your last show with us, you'll get your money, your income from us. So I can't remember what it was off the top of my head, but it was like over £1,000, wasn't it, in the example that we looked at before, or whatever. All of that ticket money income, all of that money you won't have until after you've done it. The other thing is that TTR, you will not get that free money from the government until not even 30 days. It's actually quite a slow process because you're only allowed to put in one TTR claim in per year because it's associated with your company tax return, right? So you've got that one per year. What some really savvy producers do is they make their year end basically happen as soon as the show finishes, as soon as they stop spending on the show. It's not entirely necessary. Two, it's added complications. You don't have to do it. But if you do have an accountant friend or something like that, or someone you can ask about how to either shorten a year end if you've already got a company, or how to set your year end like that, then do ask them. That's one way you can do it. But in any case, even if you do shorten that year end, and your year end is like a week after your show, you still have to put in the TTR claim, which could take you weeks to prepare the paperwork. I don't know how well you could do it really quickly, but let's say you're all really busy, fair enough. That might take you weeks, and then it's going to take a minimum of 6 weeks for HMRC to process that paperwork and give you a check back, and then you got to go and deposit it. And also it's COVID, and who knows how long these things are taking. I think my one took 12 weeks in the height of the pandemic a while ago. It's probably gone down now. So you don't get this money until months after. So you've got to kind of calculate all of that, and you've got to work out in your head, how can you make sure this show happens if you're not going to get that income and that cash until months later. So that's what cash flowing is basically, in short. I know that wasn't short, sorry. But that is what that is. So to work that out, or to kind of mathematically look at that, if you want to make a cash flow forecast, but just Google cash flow forecast templates and loads will come up. But basically you look at whatever the starting balance is in your bank account, basically, and then you add all of the income you expect to get in any given period. You might do this on a weekly basis or a monthly basis or whatever. So you have whatever money is in your bank account, add the income you've got coming in minus the money that you have to spend going out, and that gives you your closing balance. And then you basically look at that closing balance and make sure that it's always in positive. If it's in a negative, then basically it means that your cash in your bank account is going to dip under either into overdraft, or if you don't have overdraft, then that's a tricky situation. So that's what cash flowing is. Some tips about cash flowing. I hate to say it, but the easiest thing that you can negotiate is with each other and yourself. Ideally, you wouldn't have to. Ideally, you can look another way, but that is, you know, the reality, and you can look at it that way. You can also get loans from people. So a loan is like, we guarantee you to pay the money back, and they just give you some cash up front to help you spend. And then when you get the TTR claim back, then you pay that back to them, for example. Especially if it's an interest-free loan from your parents or something like this. You can also sort of, if you've got kind of, I don't know, mega friends or something like that, you can kind of do deals with them. Hire companies will often do cash flow deals, and you just talk to them and be upfront with them and say when you got the cash coming in, and they'll let you invoice and pay for the services, and they'll do the work first and then pay for it later. But the other big thing that is really helpful, that I'm going to leave you all with, and then we're going to go to final questions, is that all of the services that Vault provide you, and recharge back to you, we take out of cash, out of the settlement at the end. And the settlement is the ticket sale income that we come back. So we cash flow it, we pay for it all up front, and then you don't have to pay for it until the end of the production when we take it out of your ticket sales. So this is the single biggest help I find often for cash flowing a show at Vault Festival, is that we can do that for you. So that includes all of the marketing extras that you've already got a sent form around about, but it also includes any technicians that you might hire, or any extra lighting or tech equipment that we might bespoke hire on your behalf. So all of that comes out of your ticket sales and helps you cash flow. That's the end of this. We're 15 minutes early, which means I'm opening up to you guys about for any questions.